I'm Glenn McGuinness, and this is Outburst. This week, is Canada ready for a second wave of COVID-19?
I think we are not ready for a second wave.
I think that we are ready and we are in control so far.
I think we're being cared for. They're trying hard to find the vaccine.
We need a lot more science and a lot less politics.
We've seen the numbers climbing once again, especially in Ontario and Quebec. The Prime Minister himself has also stated that a second wave is already underway, and the repercussions from that could prove to be catastrophic, especially for our healthcare system and the economy. In certain jurisdictions in the country, they're once again tightening the screws in terms of restrictions in hopes of mitigating the virus. But how do you feel about our level of preparedness up to now? Our question: is Canada ready for a second wave of COVID-19?
That's a question I was asking myself this morning, and sadly, as much as I'm impressed with her response so far, I think we are not ready for a second wave, simply because this first wave has worn us out. As a first world country, we're so used to being happy and comfortable at doing things our very, in general, unsafe way when it comes to the virus world. And we have adapted to this crisis well. And we have, unlike a lot of other countries, we've done a good job of accepting it and not fighting back against these changes. But now, as we are relaxing all these guidelines, it's making a second wave more dangerous, because snapping back into a high degree of readiness is not something we're going to do quickly once we've had a taste of the apple of this is what it's going to be like on the other side. And I just can't imagine us quickly snapping back into a high degree of readiness.
I think one of the concerns I have is you always have a cohort, a group of people that don't believe the information, don't believe the science, don't take a proper care. And so from that perspective, I think individuals need to step up more. I think governments have the programs in place that we need, and I think we may be able to, instead of shutting down our entire economy like we've done, we can do it strategically. The flu season coming, there's big question marks at exactly how big this is going to be when we do get a second wave. But in general, I think we're well placed for it.
Any other thoughts?
Not really. I think Theresa Tam's done a great job informing everybody about the nation or about the process and what to expect. And it's just about everybody not to be complacent with how they view COVID, and just to take still a guarded approach and being cautious.
Don't pretend you know more than epidemiologists that have spent their whole lives studying these kinds of things, and healthcare professionals, and just go along with the advice for now. That's all most of us can do. I mean, I teach science, but I certainly wouldn't put anything. I don't know enough to start arguing with an epidemiologist over what's going on right now, so I won't.
This thing seems to be changing all the time. It's attacking younger people now, under 50. And what we don't know a lot, but the long-term effects are what concern me. Just because you've had it and you get to be okay, you come out of hospital. You may have lifelong disability. I don't know. We need a lot more science and a lot less politics.
Every day there's a school infected now, and if you keep that going, well, you do the math, right? It's just going to keep climbing up. So unless they start stepping back, then they can proceed again on opening it up again.
I know more about the virus than I did 6 months ago. And I certainly, those that are in the medical profession, they are more knowing of its behavior. Are we ready for it? I don't know if we're ever really ready for it.
Yes.
Why?
Because I think that government, federal and provincial, they get enough experience since March. I think that we are ready and we are in control so far. But I hope that people obey the rule and regulation, and mask and distance, to obey the distance, and that we are ready for the second wave.
I personally don't believe we got rid of the first wave, but yes, as they define a second wave, yes and no. A lot of the people are, but depending what the second wave and how it coincides with the flu epidemic, whether we really are ready to take the hard choices.
I actually would say I have no idea, but I'm going to assume we are because I feel like we handled the first one fairly well. So I'm going to assume we're ready for the second one.
All in all, I think people are more prepared to combat a second wave of the virus, given the fact that we've already kind of had several months of it.
When you go into malls, they're always packed. You go into grocery stores, they're always packed. But, you know, they have all these places that are maximum number of 20 people in a store, but yet there's 30 or 40 people in the store. And yeah, I think the second wave is definitely going to be worse.
Unfortunately, probably. I think this is something that happens in every country. People are getting complacent about COVID, and they don't realize that it's still a danger to society. Young people think, you know, that they're invincible and, you know, that it won't affect them. And unfortunately, it brings out people into crowds, and this will result in a second wave. Might not be as big as the first, but it will still happen in Canada, unfortunately.
You know what, I think we are pretty well prepared. I think it's going to be a real hit to people. I don't think that a lot of just the average Joe understands what's going to come with the cold viruses and everything else, the flu coming. I think it's going to be a real hit to us, and I think we're going to see a setback. Hopefully not another nationwide lockdown, but we'll see. Hopefully, I think we're pretty well prepared.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. I think COVID is grossly blown out of proportion. And kids are asymptomatic, and I just want COVID to go away. Yeah, honestly, yeah. Kids aren't getting sick, little kids aren't getting sick. It's the older population who are compromised. So I think that, I don't know if it'll go away, you know. I'm not concerned about it, is what I should say, yeah.
I think we're being cared for. They're trying hard to find the vaccine. So whether we're ready or not, I think we have to be sensible, and we say we're not pushing the boundaries. We're going to do what they say we can do. And as you see, I'm not wearing a mask, but I do have my masks in my pocket whenever I'm going into a place where there's more people than one or two. So I think we have to take responsibility as well. It can't all be done for us.
Since March, the federal government has invested billions of dollars to help keep things moving and to help protect Canadians from any financial hardship brought on by the pandemic. And although many Canadians agree with the steps the federal government has taken, there are still some who worry about how fast the money is rolling out the door. We took to the streets to ask Canadians their thoughts on government expenditures during a pandemic. Our question:
how concerned are you about government spending due to the pandemic?
I'm a bit concerned. I think you should balance your books long term, even if you have short term problems sometimes and spend more in these cases. But still, you should have a clear vision, I think.
Yeah, well, for sure they're spending a lot, so that might be looked at as a bad thing. But honestly, I think it's a good thing, because if the government is not spending, that means that contributors, people like you and me, would have to maybe take on credits or stuff like that to just live, to eat, and move from point A to point B. So the fact that the government is taking this hit for the people, I think it's a good thing, especially that in the long run, I'm pretty sure that if they're investing the money right, it's gonna have better result and not end up in a long-lasting crisis like in 2008.
I kind of have to side with the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, saying that due to the low interest rates that we do have, especially on our loans, is going to help, and it allows us to borrow more, which will help us have a lower deficit over time. So I think it's better to spend the money now and not have to worry about it for the next 50 years.
It seems every time we get a certain political party in power, they go crazy on the spending, which I think is way out of whack. They're expecting now all Canadians now, and for how many generations, to try and pay this huge deficit off.
I'm not concerned about it because I think we have to. I think we have to take care of the citizens in this country, however we can do it, and we'll just deal with the money later. It's the only way around it.
Sure. What about you? Same, pretty much. Yeah, I've got nothing else to add.
Okay. Yeah.
The only concern I would have is down the road and how it's going to get paid back. Otherwise, I do like that our government is looking out for us in that way.
I feel our government has been very mindful of the people, and yes, they have spent money, but we have many of us have gained from it. And as long as people aren't taking advantage above what they should, I think it's been great. I like it much better than a government that thinks it's not important.
I think it's concerning because obviously we don't want a ton of debt for years to come, but I think the government has taken an appropriate response given the seriousness of the pandemic.
It could be a problem. It'd be nice to have some leeway, but you don't have to give people so many handouts maybe. People will naturally incline themselves to work somehow, and hopefully the government doesn't have to support everybody and that we can support each other.
I mean, it's a concern, but I think it's a necessary evil in these times. We have to support the people that don't have the money, otherwise the economy would collapse. So I think it's not something I like, but something that has to occur.
Oh yeah, that's a little bit concerning. Yeah, definitely. There's things like education where there was no money before and now there seems to be money arising. I'm a teacher, so I have a little bit of concern about that.
I think the biggest hit we're going to see is yet to come, when all these people come off of CERB and everything else. You know, that's when the real problems are going to start, I think.
I worry more about my great-grandchildren paying for it, but I think they need to do what they need to do. It's a world problem. Maybe China needs to pay for some of it.
I'm not concerned as much as some people might be because we're in a crisis mode, and I think our government responded very well and addressed the needs immediately. I mean, this is an unprecedented situation, so I expect there's going to be long-term costs, but at this point I'm happy with what the federal government has been doing.
Yeah, it's certainly a concern, but I think it's got to be done in the meantime. I think there's certain situations where government spending probably has to outweigh incomes, and this is likely one of those. So I think it's we have to make adjustments moving forward for sure. This can't go on forever, but in the meantime we have to keep the economy rolling and keep people employed, and keeping them eating is all good. So
I'm massively concerned about it. We had a budget surplus the final year going into this last election, and that was one of the major debate topics I found, was how they were going to spend the fact that we were looking at a potential surplus. And going into COVID, I understand that we're going to be overspending a bit, and we're going to be raising our deficit, but I'm really concerned about long term how that's going to impact having to repay that debt over time, because Canada has, for the last 15, 20 years, not been the best at managing our debt level and trying to bring it down. We've tried to stabilize, but we haven't really had a plan for bringing it down for at least 2 decades now.
I am, yeah, as somebody who's actually claimed CERB myself, and wondering how or if I'm going to have to pay it back. I don't think they've been very clear.
I'm very concerned with the federal spending at this time. It seems like there is no limit to spending. It's like just keep on covering it, patching it up with money rather than finding solutions. And to me, that doesn't work.
How many people have been elected federal leader of the NDP? 8, 13, or 16?
16.
I'm going to say 8.
16. I'm going to go with 13.
I would say 13.
I feel like 8. 8. 8.
It's 8.
Yeah! Yeah! Woohoo!
You don't see very many high fives in a pandemic.
We live together. Yep.
The number of people elected federal leader of the NDP is 8. Back in 1961, when the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, also known as the CCF, became the NDP, its first leader was former Premier of Saskatchewan, Tommy Douglas. Following in succession was David Lewis, Ed Broadbent, Audrey McLaughlin, Alexa McDonough, Jack Layton, Thomas Mulcair, and Jagmeet Singh. When Audrey McLaughlin became leader in 1989, she became the first woman to lead a national political party in Canada. Jagmeet Singh became the first member of a visible minority to lead a federal party when he was elected leader of the NDP in 2017.
It appears we've avoided a federal election, at least for now. But we are in a minority situation, and that election could come sooner than later. And when it does, all political parties will be working hard to win your support. So once again, we put our ear to the ground to ask Canadians what it will take to win their vote when they cast their ballots. Our question:
what must a political party do to win your support during an election?
Basically just be for the people. You know, I'm more of a socialist, more of an NDP kind of a guy, but you know, I'm open to everything and anything as long as you know, they're moving in the right direction and they're people oriented. I think that seems to be the key right now.
I think dealing with the pandemic is probably number one. There's a lot of poor people, you know, that don't have money to spend. There's no jobs available. I think that's probably number one. Healthcare is probably number two. Just getting the economy back on track probably be the third thing. Yeah, I think it is very important, you know, that we deal with that as a concerted province.
I'm a former teacher, and I'm pretty much aware of how important communication is. And I feel that if the people that are looking to be elected can be in touch with their constituents and let them know where they're standing and what they're standing for, people will make an informed choice. That's my idea. I don't like all the arm's length stuff that we've had to engage in now with COVID, but as much as possible, if they can be on the grassroots level with the people, I think that will get them votes.
Create jobs and economy in Saskatchewan, basically, yeah. Have something to do good for us.
Oh my goodness, have a plan. I'm a small business owner, and I'm obviously very nervous about the future. So I would say a plan with the COVID would be my number one thing to veer me towards voting for our party at this moment, for sure.
Unemployment, to take care of unemployment, make sure that the job is there for all of us, and the training that be available for the people that fit to work, not just sit at home and give them the finance. We need the labor. We need our construction is right now, they need labor.
Well, the Liberals are talking about universal basic income, and that really appeals to me. It will be a huge thing, especially from what I've read about it. Having like small success stories and small samples.
Why is that important to you?
As someone with mental health issues, I struggle with keeping a job. So I think it would help with homelessness. It would help a lot of different things.
Politicians need to be honest. I think we're seeing in the world so much fake news being created, whether it be by media or by government itself. I want to be able to make valued judgments as an intelligent person, using the government as one of those tools to allow me to make those decisions. They've just got to be honest. They've just got to tell me the truth.
I think putting people above profits is kind of where I'd be coming from. I understand the need of getting people back to work, but not at the expense of people's health. Especially our older population and our more compromised population. I don't think it's right to be moving ahead as fast as we have been. So for me, I think politicians that are kind of thinking more about the health aspect, I'd be in favor of.
For the federal, I'd like to see it, have a plan in the future of how they're going to reduce our deficit. It seems like if they keep continuing the way they're spending, it will become unsustainable within 1 to 2 years.
In the next election, in order to gain my support, you need to show that you have a long-term plan, not just for protecting the citizens, but also for protecting our future. And our future is definitely managing government debts so our children don't go bankrupt having to pay for what we're enjoying today, as well as showing me a future that I would be proud to have those children live in.
Statistics Canada says the poverty rate in this country has seen a slight decline over the last few years. But despite that, millions of Canadians still live below the poverty line, especially in some remote Indigenous communities. A pandemic can exacerbate the effects of poverty, especially for those who have nowhere else to turn. So, what can we do to make things better? Our question.
What ideas do you have to reduce poverty in Canada?
I guess one of the biggest barriers that people that are especially homeless or financially insecure have is the lack of an address. So an increase of socialized housing or even just socialized accommodations, which would allow multiple citizens to use, even if it's just to have a landline and an address, which helps them hurdle barriers such as finding employment or accessing certain services.
Maybe access to skill programs so that they can learn a trade or learn a service or learn some form of program so that they can put that into getting a job into the workforce.
Yeah, basically I think along with what they're saying, but I think you start with the basic income. And I think you start with that, then you start adding all the skills programs and the resources like that. But I think it has to start with that, because otherwise people are they can't do it.
I don't know. I've been reading that in Europe, they're giving everyone a certain minimum wage. So regardless of what you do, what your background is, whatever, everyone gets a certain minimum amount to use as best they can. And they tried that as an experiment. Apparently it didn't work. The idea of giving people something for nothing, it doesn't work. You have zero value for whatever you give them. So what to do about it? I really don't know. I don't know. The population, they've always had poor, they've always had middle, they always had extreme rich and everything in between. And it doesn't matter what you do. There's no perfect system out there. So I really can't answer that.
I would say economic growth, good economy.
Diversification of economy, because I live in Alberta, so I think it's a big one nowadays. As before they were investing everything, pouring all the money into oil and gas, and now it's, the situation.
I'm not sure that it's ultimately solvable. I think there's always going to be a marginal number of people who, for whatever reasons, are just not able to kind of live in that kind of social construct, right? And but I think that our responsibility needs to be to continue to encourage governments and people that have both the power and the money to make sure that housing is available, and that we can get people that desperately need, whether it be medical care and need clothing, need a warm place to sleep, that we can provide that, and not be walking out into a park and seeing little tent cities and whatnot. It just doesn't. I don't think it represents the kind of country that we are, the civil country that we can be, and yeah, we just need to kind of keep our foot on the gas.
Well, I think we do a lot in terms of social programs to try and improve people's situations, but I do think that we struggle a bit in the outreach department. The programs are there, but we don't link that with trying to actually reach the people who need it. They have to actively seek it out. And I understand that that's a balancing act. In order for people to move out of poverty, they do have to have some wish to move out of poverty, but at the same time, if they're not well educated to the opportunities, how can they choose to make that movement? So it's a tricky balancing act that I think we're not there yet. We've definitely spent money on the programs, but we haven't spent money in the right way, in my opinion.
Immediately all that comes to mind is more homeless shelters. The wintertime sucks here, so that can be deadly. And dealing with the meth epidemic, because I've seen firsthand living downtown that affects people very dramatically.
Increased taxes on the super rich. I think the disparity in the highest income earners and the lowest has just gotten out of hand, and we have to do something about that.
Certainly systemic racism is a huge thing in Canada. FSIN and those organizations really need to start speaking up for their people, and the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan and Canada. When you consider that most people under the poverty line are First Nation or Métis, that's a huge concern. And certainly it's forgotten, you know.
Well, the guaranteed income supplement might be a way, but that's no guarantee either. It's a possibility, but not guaranteed.
I think one of the things that's linked to poverty that people don't understand is addiction is a serious issue, linked to poverty and mental health. So those things have to be addressed before you can deal with poverty.
Other than what's already been done, it's tough to reinvent things all the time. But again, the government has to be able to listen, be aware, and not be complacent. So there might be some new ideas coming out of this experience of COVID-19 that may help, because people are wanting to turn the sod on new ideas, right?
In Saskatoon, for downtown, for example, there's a lot of people every single day that are asking for change, and there's repeat people that you do get to know and see often, and it'd be nice for the city to, I don't know if we need to necessarily make another lighthouse, like more places for these people to go and have a safe place to sleep and eat. But I feel like we can definitely do a better job with poverty in Saskatoon.
I really do like the guaranteed basic income plan. I was not a fan until about a year ago, when I've actually done some research, read up some books and some articles, and there's been case studies in Manitoba and other countries. I didn't think it would work, but actually I'm beginning to be convinced that actually it would be a very good idea for Canada to seriously consider a universal basic income. I think that probably would be the best thing we could do for poor people.
Mental health is my thing. I think we need a lot more help with mental health in the city. For like people that are struggling with addictions and people that are struggling with things that they don't know about with their mental health, I feel like that causes homelessness and causes not showing up to work and causes a lot of the stuff that leads up to you being in poverty?
You know what, that's a tough question. We have a real problem here. Again, I could go outside the box, and you know, my sort of socialist background would say that maybe we need to stop investing so much in foreign policy and a little more in the home economics and deal with our own people. We have people here living on the street on a regular basis and don't have enough to eat. And you know, I appreciate the political behind it all to invest in foreign countries, but I think we need to look after our own a little bit more.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on the Cable Public Affairs channel. I'm Glenn McGuinness. If you have any comments or questions about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. It's your turn to speak up, and we're listening.